It's time for us to check back in with the thread that runs so true and see what happens next. If you missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist. The parent-teacher organization was the best organization we had to present the Lansboro problems that affected our high school. It was not a large organization. Not half the parents whose sons and daughters attended Lansboro High School belonged to the PTA. None of the parents of our county pupils attended, since they lived miles away and were without, for the most part, convenient methods of travel. Our PTA was and had been more or less a social function where parents and teachers got together and drank tea and ate cakes at the end of each meeting. I thought it time to do something besides eat and drink. It was time we did something constructive for the high school and community. But I didn't know how to go about presenting my problem to these mothers, for seldom did a father attend one of the PTA meetings, and the husbands of these women were in many cases involved in the vices we had to eliminate. Then something happened that gave me the chance. We had arranged a schedule whereby 2 teachers remained at the high school during noon hour, while the others went downtown for their lunches. We rotated this schedule. My turn came to be at the high school during the noon hour. I had heard gambling had been going on beyond the high board fence that surrounded the athletic field. I made it a point to start walking leisurely around this fence. Autumn was in the air, and the sycamores, birches, and willows between the schoolhouse and the river were flaunting their bright-colored leaves to the autumn wind. The air was crisp and fine to breathe. It was a beautiful day. When I walked around the corner of the high board fence, I came upon the young card players. A top coat was spread on the ground. Cards, silver, and folding money were lying on the coat. 4 young men were sitting on the ground around the coat with cards in their hands. 15 or 20 young men were standing around watching this poker game. I'd walked around the fence corner and was standing in their midst, unnoticed, for everyone was watching the cards and money. "Who's winning and who's losing, fellas?" I asked. One of the young men playing poker was the son of a Lansboro minister. One was the son of a rural schoolteacher. 2 were the sons of a Lansboro merchant. When they saw me, their faces turned sliced beet red. They couldn't speak. They looked at each other. The young men who had gathered to watch the poker game began to scatter. I didn't bother the cards or the money, or tell them to take them or to quit playing poker. I walked on. I left this problem in the pupils' hands for them to worry about. I walked on around the board fence where the sycamore, birch, and willow leaves were drifting like golden birds with every gust of autumn wind. When I reached the far corner of the fence, I looked back, and the gamblers' money and coat had disappeared. That afternoon, these young men expected me to have them in my office, but I was going further than just to reprimand them for a temptation placed before them. We had to have the ounce of prevention to effect the pound of cure. I knew my catching these young men playing poker would be news in Lansboro. I knew that everybody would know it, for there were way too many young men standing around not to tell it, and I knew it was not good publicity for our school. The first person to ask me about her son's gambling was Mrs. Hunter, wife of the Methodist minister. She asked me what punishment I was going to inflict. I replied, I hadn't made up my mind, I told her. On second thought, I probably wouldn't punish any of them. She couldn't believe me. "Do you believe in letting your pupils gamble?" she asked, staring at me wildly. "No, I don't believe in letting pupils gamble," I told her. "Then why don't you do something about it?" she asked me. I didn't say anything more. I wanted her to talk. I wanted her to tell other women, and I knew she would. I wanted them all to talk. The mother of each son caught in this act came to me and asked what I was going to do about the gambling at Lansboro High School. I didn't give one of them a satisfactory answer. I let them talk and tell others. Finally, these women must have decided I approved of gambling, for the members of the PTA took the responsibility upon themselves to bring it up at our next meeting. I had not punished any offender. Each one of these young men was worried too, for he had come to me more than once and apologized and wanted to know what his punishment was going to be. He was getting his punishment, but he didn't know it. Suspense is great punishment. At our first PTA meeting after the gambling incident, I noticed that the members of the PTA were very somber. They didn't laugh and talk as they had done at each of our former social meetings. The Methodist minister, Reverend Hunter, was among the PTA members. Several fathers had come to this meeting. After the meeting had come to order, Mrs. Albert Davis, president of the PTA, soon finished with the organization's business. Then she said, "Something has been going on at the high school. I would like to bring it up. It is a sad reflection, but a true one, and it is the talk of the town. It is the gambling that has been going on here. Pupils were caught in the act and have never been punished. We would like to hear from Mr. Stuart if he has anything to say regarding this situation." "I have a lot to say," I said, rising to my feet. "First, I want to tell you why I haven't punished these young men. I don't see any use in punishing them until a few temptations are removed. I happen to know about these temptations." Then I told them how my clothes had been criticized and how I had moved to the Lansboro Hotel. I told them their criticizing my clothes was the reason for my knowing all about the town. That in my room in the Lansboro Hotel, I could see over the town in all directions but one, and that if anyone didn't believe me, he should come to my room and switch off the lights and look over the town at night. I told them I had the room the town's police ought to have. Then I said to the mothers and fathers in the PTA that I had seen their sons and daughters walk in the streets until midnight. I asked them if they knew where they were at night, if they knew what time they got in off the streets. Women whispered to each other. Their faces reddened, and they looked down at their desk. I told them their sons were able to buy illegal whiskey, and there was not one among them that didn't know where they could get it. That to stop the sale of whiskey to their sons was their business. It was the town's business and not the teachers'. Yet it did concern the high school, for our young men had gotten drunk on riverboat excursions, and the school had been blamed for it. Now it was their duty to eliminate the temptations. And another thing, I said, gambling is carried on in many of the homes in this town. Poker for money is played before your sons and daughters. You know who these people are. Fathers of the young men on our football team, wearing derby hats with long cigars in their mouths, walk up and down the sidelines with a bankroll in their hands and bet as much as $50 on one of our football games. You know this is true. It is said that the men in this town will gamble over who can spit the closest to a knothole on the wall or a crack in the floor. The parents in this town must have a change of heart if we are to break up gambling in this school. I'm certainly glad, Mrs. Davis, you brought this up. And another thing, I continued, somebody had better pass the word to the town's favorite bootlegger to be careful to whom he sells his whiskey. Remember, he has 5 pupils in this school. If you want to watch him sell some evening, come up to my room. If you want to know his customers, be sure to come to my room. One thing more, and this is all I have to say, I concluded. Lansboro High School is not a separate unit from you. We are part of you. Every man, woman, and child in this community is a part of Lansboro High School. Your ways of life in your homes and in the town reflects here in the school. You can help us or you can hurt us. Our success here depends largely on you. I used to think when I first started teaching school that it was all up to the teachers and the pupils. I have changed my mind. The little island of humanity that is each one of you must unite with the other islands and become a mainland if we are to have a successful school. The results of this PTA meeting solved the problems in Lansboro. I never again saw any parents betting on football games. Something suddenly happened to the little racehorse slot machine. The jukebox dancing ended gracefully at 9 o'clock, for the city's Board of Aldermen imposed a curfew to ring at 9, and every pupil enrolled in school had to be in off the streets. Drinking suddenly ended among our young men. Not one person was arrested. Our school had caused a moral reformation among the citizens of Lansboro. Gambling never occurred again at our local high school, and the only punishment I gave the 4 young men caught in the act was suspense. They waited and waited for something to happen, but it never did. In 6 weeks, we gladly showed members of our PTA what their cooperation had done in their sons' and daughters' grades. Many of their sons and daughters who had been failing were now making passing grades. Many pupils who had been passing with low marks had lifted their average a letter higher. The unexcused tardy and absence marks had diminished approximately 70%. Schoolwork had been made easier for us. The pupils were happier and loved school more. This was the result of cooperation between parents, citizens, teachers, and pupils. This PTA has taught us something, Bill Haddon remarked later at a teachers' meeting. All you have to do to solve a town problem that hurts your school is to get the women on your side, show them what's wrong, and they'll clean it up. Helen Kirsten was our only faculty member not from Kentucky. She was from New York City. And when she came to the small town of Lansboro in faraway Kentucky, she had many adjustments to make. We didn't know this. Not one of us had ever been in New York City. Teachers and pupils in Lansboro High School were more interested in Miss Kirsten's dialect, and she was very much interested in our dialect and in our idioms of speech. She was interested in everything, especially in work. We didn't have a faculty member that worked harder than this tall, slender, black-haired, blue-eyed young teacher from New York City. After our first faculty meeting, she never complained about the work given her. When she learned the number of pupils we had in school and the too few teachers to do the work, she didn't complain about her load. She was hired for the position of part-time librarian and part-time teacher, but after we had our first teachers' meeting, Miss Kirsten was made a full-time teacher. She also assumed responsibility for the library. "I think I can work this situation out, Mr. Stuart," she said. "Don't you worry too much about it. Don't expect too much for about 2 weeks." In 2 weeks, Miss Kirsten had selected girls from the high school and had trained them in simple library rules. She selected 2 girls to stay in the library for each period during the day, and at an intermission between class bells, Miss Kirsten would hurry to the library to see if any problem had arisen the girls couldn't handle. She had 1 free period in the afternoon when she would remain in the library, but she worked out a library system with the help of our pupils and her supervision, which operated smoothly. We didn't lose a single book during the year. A few were mislaid, but Miss Kirsten found and returned them. At first we regarded Miss Kirsten as very different from us. Her speech was different. Her training was different. She had different ideas about teaching school. She was an exacting person. She didn't give and she didn't take. If a pupil lacked 1% of making a passing grade, that pupil failed in Miss Kirsten's freshman English. She was the first teacher at school each morning, and she was the last to leave in the afternoon. At faculty meetings, she was very quiet unless she was asked for an opinion, and she was never without opinions on school problems. She had her own ideas how to solve them. Her ideas were very different from ours. Soon we faculty members learned to know and to understand Miss Kirsten. She learned to know and to understand us. Once she came to me and said, "Mr. Stuart, now I am teaching English and composition for you. I want you to tell me exactly how you want me to teach. I want to do it your way so you will be perfectly satisfied." "Miss Kirsten, when I have a teacher with your originality," I said, "I would like to put the responsibility of teaching English directly into your own hands. Original English teachers are hard to find. You are one of the few. All I ask you to do is to teach English your way. I'll give you all the freedom you want." This pleased Helen Kirsten more than anything I ever said to her. One day she came to me with a smile. "Here, Mr. Stuart," she said, giving me a sheaf of theme papers. "I know you are interested in creative writing, and I want you to see these themes from my classes." When I read these themes, I got a real surprise. In them was the beauty of simple English language where many common nouns, simple verbs, and few adjectives were used. There was something in these freshman high school themes that was akin to early English and Irish poetry. There was something in the mood of them that left in me a feeling such as I'd had when I first read Riders to the Sea and Playboy of the Western World. I had regarded these plays as poetry, and I regarded these themes as poetry. They sang themselves. They were as natural in their singing as little streams of melted snow water pouring over the rocks on a steep Kentucky hill in March. They were as natural in their choice of simple common nouns, verbs used as nouns, and nouns used as verbs, as red cells of redbud blossoms and white cells of dogwood blossoms are to the bright April winds in Kentucky. I try to write. Why don't I write like this, I thought, as I returned these themes to Helen Kirsten. How do you get work like this from pupils who have never written themes before? I inquired. I know many of your pupils have never been required to write a theme. I think this is excellent work. I've never read better creative work from high school pupils. These themes are poetry. Yes, Mr. Stuart, Miss Kirsten smiled. Poetry is in these people from your hills. Your hills, rivers, trees, log shacks, crying waters, wild flowers, and little fields of grain, green in spring, ripening in summer, and harvested in autumn, have put this poetry in them. But the language, she sighed. Ah, the language. I've never heard anything like it. It's not too soft. It's not harsh. For the first time in my life, I've heard people talk with rhythm. It's poetry. You never pronounce G at the end of a word, and you supplement the prefix A. I've noticed that in all my pupils. Their language is poetry. Poetry is in them. Why don't they write it? They are crying for creative expression. Tell me more of your observation of the people here, Miss Kirsten, I said. I've never thought of these things before. No, you live in them, she said. You grew up here. You are a part of all this. That is why you don't see it. You live poetry instead of writing it. All of you do. Your pupils do. But tell me, how do you get your pupils to express themselves like this, I asked. I let them write their own thoughts any way they see fit, she said. I give them all the freedom they want to express themselves and on any subject they choose to write. I let them put it in any form they choose. After they have written their themes, she explained, we read them in class. Anybody has the right to offer any suggestion he may have on his classmate's theme. We don't always correct all the mistakes. You've noticed that. Yes, I have. We don't correct a mistake when it gives color and originality to a theme, she said. Though Helen Kirsten had come to Kentucky a stranger, she was not a stranger very long. Soon the pupils and teachers began to know her better. The pupils from the Greenwood County Hills were especially fond of her. They invited her to their homes over the weekend. Often on Friday afternoons, I saw her climb onto one of the crowded school buses with a suitcase in her hand. She went into the valleys and hollows, to the land of log shacks and lonesome waters. She went to shacks where there had never been an electric light, a bathroom, or a telephone. And surely Miss Kirsten from New York City had been used to these conveniences all her life. Helen Kirsten had never seen men cut corn, dig potatoes, make sorghum at a cane mill in a bright gold-leafed autumn. She had never seen men chop down trees and draw the logs on the ground with cattle and mules to a wood yard, and saw these logs into sticks with a cross-cut saw, and burn the sticks on the big open fireplaces. She had never seen cellars and smokehouses filled with provisions for winter the way the Greenwood County people, who were often isolated during the winter, had provided for the hard winters ahead. And she had not been among people who had to make their own entertainment, such as dances, games, and old-time music. It was these pupils who played the old-time music without knowing a note of music, who had written the good themes for her. Our having Helen Kirsten with an entirely different background added to our school. It gave me this idea that there should be an exchange of teachers in the schools of America, that teachers from different parts of America gave pupils a broader outlook on life, gave them a better background and preparation for the future, that each school needed a variety of faculty members, that to select all teachers from the hometown would eventually mean intellectual inbreeding, and that soon the results would begin to show in the community, that the whole of America was greater than any of its parts, and that therefore we should have a cross-section of thought and stimulation from different parts of America to give us originality, to make us vigorous and strong. Each of America's regions complemented the other materially and made the wealthy whole. Then why wouldn't each of America's parts complement the other intellectually in our school systems to give us greater understanding of each other and to give wisdom to the whole? I knew that Helen Kirsten was one teacher who would be on my faculty as long as she wanted to stay. We'll stop right there for today. So we finally got to find out how he was going to fix the students, the pupils, as he calls them, out there drinking and carousing in the town after midnight. It's interesting how that played out. Before that, though, I love at the very beginning, when he figured out how he knew he couldn't do it himself. He knew this was something he was going to have to figure out. I love the part of when he's it's his turn to stay there for lunch, for their dinner, instead of going into town, and he's heard about the gambling, so he starts walking around the fence there, and he says it's a beautiful day, and I love this. He said flaunting the leaves, the trees were flaunting bright colored leaves to the autumn wind. And then in that part too, he said that it was like golden birds. In another part, after he'd confronted the gamblers and left, just paints such a beautiful scene. I love that. I often talk about the trees putting on their spring garments or putting on their fall garments, those beautiful colors. But I love that flaunting. If you live in a place where the trees turn color in the fall, it really is like they're flaunting their beautiful colored leaves. So I just loved that. I liked when he was talking about the little gambling scene there, that he noticed they had folding money. I thought about that. You've probably heard that and maybe read it in books or in old, TV shows or movies or something, or maybe somebody in your family calls like dollar bills folding money. And I don't really hear nobody say that today, but I've heard people, so I knew what it was, certainly. But I was thinking about that, about how that kind of fell out of fashion and nobody really called it folding money. And then today, a lot of people don't even carry cash. It's all on your card, your debit card. So I just thought that was really, really interesting. And thinking about, if you watch all of our videos, on Monday I've been doing these lives and we talk about wisdom from the commenters, from you. And so he used one that certainly would be perfect to share, was one, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You've heard that. But he compared that to the prevention, that they've got to prevent it. They've got to keep that temptation away from the students. And several of y'all are so smart. Last week, in last week's book reading, you left the comment, several of you did, that I was kind of saying that Jason, how silly it was for him to come and complain about Jesse's dyed pants, which really wasn't dyed. But several of you said, no, maybe Jason was really smart and he knew that would make him move into town. And once he moved into town, then he would see that what was going on, the drinking and the carousing, and he would stop it, So maybe Jason was really, really smart and he just used the pants as an excuse to get Jesse to move into town and take care of his problem. So I never even thought of that. That's so smart. Thank you. But it's kind of the same. It's sneaky, but Jesse used the same kind of technique, I guess, to get the PTA meeting. So he didn't punish the boys, and then when the mothers started coming up to him, he just was like, well, yeah, I'm against it. And they're like, well, what are you going to do to punish him? And he's like, well, he just kind of kept putting them off. So he knew they would go out and talk about him. So they were all the whole town probably was in outrage. We've got a principal that's letting our kids gamble and he's not even going to punish them. You can just imagine all the conversations that was going on. But Jesse was really smart to do that, because then that made more people come to the PTA meeting, and then he had a bigger audience and had more of, I think, some of the important people, and definitely the men that had not been coming, to hear what he was going to say. And after he told his little spiel there, and he even invited, if you don't believe me, come up to my room, then they all had to kind of say, well, we gotta do something about this. So the whole town got involved. So Jesse was really smart in doing that, and I think now that y'all shared that with me, I think maybe that was what Jason was doing. That makes sense too, because why would they care about his pants? Maybe they did really want him to get into town, and then he could get a better halt, as we would say, on that situation, and end up fixing it, which he did. Really amazing when they all come together though, and then he's had the direct proof to share with them once the curfew was in place and the drinking had stopped and all that. He had the proof. 70% less tardies and absences. That's amazing in itself. But then he even had the proof in the grades that a lot of them that were failing were now passing, and some of them that was just kind of semi-passing were even doing better, was excelling. So really, really smart. And during that, he used a real good technique, I think, to punish those boys that were gambling, the suspense of just not knowing. That is, if you've ever been in a situation where you've done something wrong, thinking back to when you're a child, or I guess as an adult too, but often that worry of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in so much trouble, what's going to happen to me, are they going to be mad at me, are they going to forgive me, all those things, that's kind of worse than when it actually happens and you're actually confronted and, and somebody actually tells you, either punishes you or just tells you how disappointed they are. Then at least it's over. It's almost better than that suspense. So I thought that was really smart of Jesse to let that be their punishment. When I was growing up, Pap and Granny, they were parents that did believe in that hickory tea, if you will. I don't know if I guess you just call that spanking. I was thinking, is that corporal punishment? I don't know, but they did believe in that. And that hurts, and that gets your attention. But what mostly for me was I couldn't bear, what made me want to straighten up and fly right was Pap's disappointment. Like if he just looked at me and was disappointed, I just wanted to, fall in a hole and never come out. It was just so broke my heart that I had disappointed him. So oftentimes those feelings are worse than the actual punishment, whether it's grounding someone, taking something away from them, or if you were in a family that had the hickory tea. And then the last part about Miss Kirsten, she sounded like a really, really neat lady. She reminded me of some different people, but especially about this same time frame, some ladies that come to the folk school. And really interesting. And one of them, there's a book, if I can, I'll get the name of it and put it in the description below. That might be a book that would be neat for us to read. I'll have to think about that. I've not thought of it before. Anyway, but had a real influence later in life in Brasstown. She ended up not leaving. She stayed. But it reminded me of that same kind of someone that come from a different culture and then come and fell in love with the people where they were at. So you can tell by the way, and of course it just makes my heart sing, Miss Kirsten talking about that she loves the way they speak and she thinks that's just pure poetry. I love that she said she had never heard people speak with a rhythm. That just thrills me. I love that. I've heard other people say that about the Southern accent, the Appalachian accent, is that it is kind of a rhythmic, like a sing-song, almost like you're singing. So I love that, absolutely. And then the way she described their surroundings, talking about the fields of grain and just the actual landscape they were living in. Why wouldn't they be easy for them to create poetry, to write these themes? Because they were living it. They were living right in the middle of poetry themselves. And she even told Jesse, that's why you don't see it, is because you're part of it. But she's seen it from an outside view. Now, I think I see it. If you watch our videos, I just could wax poetic all day long about the beauty of Appalachia. If I just look around me right now, I can see my Tommy toes, I can see some sunflowers, the comfrey, how beautiful that is. But then if I just have to look up a little bit to see the trees, and me might have a locust tree back there that we both really, really love. There's not as many locust trees around. That one just come up by itself, and it's a pretty big tree now. Been growing a long, long time. anyway, I see all these things. Of course, I felt some sprinkles a minute ago. I thought I'm going to get rained on, but looking at the beautiful clouds, we've got dark clouds over here against the green of the mountains. Just so beautiful. If I listen real close, I might be able to hear the creek, all those things. I think she's right. I live in poetry everywhere I look, and of course I'm very partial to the way that people in my area of Appalachia speak, and think about the music and the food and all that. So I really love that part, her bragging on the people there of Kentucky. I thought that was just lovely. So I hope you enjoyed this part as much as I did, and you'll have to leave a comment and tell me what you think. I always find the things you talk about very interesting, especially like the, saying I hadn't even give that any thought, that Jason was probably just his way to get Jesse to move to town, talking about the dyed pants, which was so silly. They wasn't dyed, but anyway, it was silly. So wouldn't you have liked to have been there at that PTA meeting, though, and heard Jesse and seen their faces and saying, you're criticizing my pants, is why I was. Wouldn't you have liked to have been there and seen that? So I hope you enjoyed it, and please do drop back by next Friday, because we'll have to see what happens to him next.